Hello, today is May 22nd, 2019. I'm meeting today with Mr. Jack Blackburn at his home in Loveland, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Jack, and thanks for sitting down today to tell your story.
No, you're welcome. I'm glad to do it.
Very good. Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
Well, I was born March 1st, 1925 in Kansas City, Missouri, and didn't live there very long. We moved to the Chicago area, and I went to New Trier High School in Winnetka, Illinois. And I think I mentioned that since that time, family has grown from 4 kids to 12 grandchildren and 19 great-grandchildren. That's the development of the family.
How about your original family? Any brothers and sisters?
I have a brother, and he's 2 years younger than I am. And he also served in the Pacific Theater.
Wow.
In fact, we just missed each other one time on different ships going near the Philippines.
I'll be darned. One question I always like to ask your generation, do you have much memory, and did the Great Depression affect your family? What was the effect on your family, and what memories do you have of the Great Depression?
Well, actually, my dad didn't get hit very bad by the Depression. He seemed to be able to work through most of it. But towards the end of the Depression, they did close down his company, and we had a difficult time. I remember I went to work in high school as a caddy, $1.25 a loop, and I remember turning that money over to my mother one time and telling her, and she said, "What's this for?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I know we're going through difficult times." And she broke down in tears.
Wow.
One of my memories.
Yeah. What do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Pardon me?
Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Yes, by then we had, after my dad had lost his job, we moved to, he worked as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., and so we moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and then we moved across the Potomac to Rockville, Maryland. And I was in Rockville in high school, and I remember hearing the news on one of those old Philco radios. And I don't think my dad was home that day, but my mother was, and I said, "Where in the world is Pearl Harbor?" And then I found out in a hurry.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you were, what, 15, 16 years old when?
About then. Yeah.
So you finished high school then, and
No, I was still in high school.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Pretty close to leaving, though.
but you went on to finish high school and then enlisted, got drafted. How did?
I went to the University of North Carolina, and I was there for about half of the first quarter or semester or whatever it was. And I went from, that's in Chapel Hill, and I went over to Raleigh, North Carolina, and enlisted. Got very patriotic.
Well, now of all the service branches, how did you come to choose the Navy?
Well, on a humorous note, I used to say that I was a very slow runner, but I was a good swimmer. On the not so humorous side, it was a more attractive branch for me. So I don't know there was any major reason I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But
How soon after you enlisted then did you ship off to boot camp? roughly?
Let's see that. I enlisted in April of '43, and then I was at Chapel Hill. And it was a very short time, and I was quickly enlisted and shipped to Bainbridge, Maryland for boot camp. And I've even forgotten how long boot camp was, but.
And how was that transition going from civilian life into military life? Was that much of a, and going through boot camp, was that much of a issue with you, or much of a transition?
It was not difficult, I don't think. No, it was a pretty easy session, I think.
And then from boot camp, did you go on for additional training or go right to a ship?
From boot camp, I was shipped to, I think, why I can remember that number, it seems to me it was like Pier 92 in New York to pick up a ship.
Oh,
I
wow.
wasn't assigned a ship yet, but I was up there for assignment. And so I was really stationed in very near Manhattan. How long? I was there for about 3 weeks before I went on the ship.
And
That was my best time in the Navy.
in New York City?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in those days, everybody was quite patriotic. And we had a group of guys that used to go into Manhattan, and we could go to dinner, go to shows, USOs, all the things they did, and I could never pick up a check.
Wow.
Whoever was there, be time to pay, and they'd say, "Oh, he got it," or "he got it," or "he got it." I said, I kind of wish I could stay in New York.
Yeah.
But
So you got assigned a ship, and was that the ship that you would stay on then?
right. I might say, when back to boot camp, that the one crazy incident I had was, for some reason, I thought I'd like to serve on a submarine.
Oh, boy.
And so they had it set up for us to take these tests with the pharmacist mates game. Anyway, the net result of the whole story, which gets kind of boring, was that I slipped over to where they do the testing. I memorized the eye chart because I knew that would be a difficult one. And so when I went over there, I can still remember the letters AELTYPHEALT.
Wow.
That's the only thing I can remember. And so his pharmacist mate set me up in front and said, "Okay, read those." And I read them. Well, they had changed the eye chart. Needless to say, I did not become a submariner, and I'm happy about that because I get claustrophobia in an elevator, so I would have been a terrible submariner.
That's a great
And
story.
so, yeah, then after about 3 weeks, I was assigned just as an ordinary seaman to go on the Ulvert M or DE 442.
And sailed out of New York from there then? Yeah.
And well, our schedule was, I went on a shakedown cruise with them in August. We went to Bermuda.
So it was a brand new ship then?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we came back for, I don't know, availability or maintenance. And then we went and escorted a small carrier down to New York. And then we went down to Aruba. And from Aruba through the Panama Canal to San Pedro.
What was that experience like going through the canal? That must have been
The
fascinating.
other strange memory, Aruba at that time was a big sulfur mining community. And when you get within 100 miles of it, it smelled like rotten eggs. And we were kind of glad we didn't have much liberty there. And then we headed through the canal and up the coast. Had quite a rocky time there, and after we came, it was the Gulf of Mexico. We had some really rough weather, and I can remember that because I think we hit a record angle of, it was close to 50 degrees, which we wondered, are we coming back up?
How was that, particularly, here's a boy from the upper Midwest going to sea. Did you initially get your sea legs, or how was it through your career?
First, from about New York to Norfolk, I think I traveled all by rail. I was sick as a dog.
Oh.
And I can still remember one particular chief bosun's mate was an old salt. He'd been in for 25 years, I think. And he just really enjoyed walking by all these new sailors eating a candy bar or something, and sending us back to the rail. That was his idea of a joke. And from there, and from we picked up the aircraft carrier, I think, Colorado, we were escorting over to Pearl Harbor, but they had spotted some submarines somewhere, I don't remember, between Pearl Harbor and San Pedro. So they sent us chasing after that. It was kind of a wild goose chase, but we went back and forth between San Pedro and Pearl Harbor probably 8, 9, 10 times, just trying to find out where these guys are. It's just like on the East Coast, you know, they had the scares from the German subs, had the same deal over in the Pacific. And
So what was your duty on the ship then, primary duty?
well, actually, as I say, I went on as the lowest possible sailor, scraping the decks and everything else. And I'm not really sure how it happened, Brad, but I ended up working in a Radio Shack, decoding messages. They had a little machine, and a bunch of chains going. You pull them down, and the letters would make some sense. And so I was doing that, and then I remember a fellow by the name of Ken Maxwell, who was working shifts with me, started helping with the Morse code. Anyway, long story short, I ended up as a radio man.
Really, with no prior schooling or just on-the-job training, huh?
No, I just kind of picked it up, and so then that was my regular watch, was in the Radio Shack. But I was assigned to the stern 5-inch gun mount for the battle station.
Okay.
And they put the better code copiers stay up in the shack. Get me out of there. And I had interesting experience as an introduction to the 5-inch gun mount, which I knew nothing about. You know, they don't have any 5-inch guns in boot camp for us to train with.
Yeah, right.
So I went on there, and the gun captain gave me some asbestos gloves. I go up to about here, you know. And he said, "You're our hot shellman." I said, "What's a hot shell?" He says, "You load it, and you make sure it gets out of the mount after we fire." And I said, "Okay, I'm ready," because it comes out pretty hot.
Yeah.
And the first one that came out, I missed it a mile, and it bounced all over the gun mount and hit our gun captain. I still remember him, George Bokel, on the leg. And I think he was ready to throw me overboard. I said, I guess I'm not a very good trainee. But that's where I ended up spending all the time, is in the 5-inch gun mount. And so I forget where what all we did from there.
Well, talk a little about what was life like on aboard ship, your sleeping quarters, talk a little about the food, what you guys did when you weren't on duty, just general day-to-day life on aboard the ship.
Well, mostly we're standing watch 4 hours on and 8 off, and we slept below deck, and there was hammocks. I forget how many were stacked. I think it was only 2 high. Could have been 3 high, yeah. And it was just a hammock swing. That's what it was, a hammock. And as far as, I never had any sleeping. If it got really hot, I mean, we'd take some bedding out and sleep on deck. But it was kind of easy to get used to. The food at first was difficult. I got a little tired of powdered eggs and powdered milk, and which we used, and chipped beef on toast, which we used to have a different name for.
SOS, yeah.
Right. But we got, yeah, it was.
So generally things were fairly comfortable for you? Yeah.
We used to love to pull up next to aircraft carrier or something, even out at sea, because they're the only ones that had ice cream, and they could transfer it across on the lines. And but other than that, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So your primary job, the ship, was to escort carriers and such?
The destroyer escort's primarily there to screen for carriers who are on anti-submarine duty, or, chase the subs away. Chase the subs away and chase the kamikaze away and stuff like that. And so I'm trying to think which one we left that particular area and went to the Caroline Islands. It was Ulithi, and then Guam and Saipan, the Marianas, and I forget, all over the Pacific out there.
Wow.
And then I'd have to do my cheat sheet to tell you about exactly where we were.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely. You bet. Yeah.
Well, I can. It's my shot. I've already got chocolate on it, my cheat sheet. But yeah, from San Pedro to Cabo. Then we joined 2 carriers and 3 Ds on anti-submarine duty around Pearl Harbor, and then left for duty in, I had that right, the Marshalls and the Marianas. And then we went to Luzon for the Philippine liberation.
Oh, wow.
And that really started when we had some action, and that was in January of 1945. And when we went to Luzon, January, that's not quite right, I don't think. I don't even think my notes are right. But anyhow, for about 8 or 10 or 12 days, we were under attack, and we got a kamikaze a day for 3 days.
Oh, jeez.
And what else happened there? We're under attack, and then January 31st, we got a call to help another carrier and some DEs who had picked up a submarine contact somewhere around in the Philippines there. And we made 8 passes, and we never saw life jackets or clothes or anything like that come up, but there was a tremendous explosion and no more contact. So they gave us credit for a kill, and we take all the credit we could get.
Yeah. So you guys do the depth charges as well?
Yeah, we had depth charges. We did have 3 torpedoes on the ship, but we never fired them, so we didn't use that. We had depth charges, we had hedgehogs, we had 2 5-inch guns. I'm not sure how many 20 millimeters and how many 40 millimeters. Pretty much armament for a little ship. It's only the length of a football field. I always say I think it was made to go in Great Lakes and not in the ocean.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah.
But
What was roughly the size of the crew?
there was 200,
Yeah.
I think it was 200 with 10 officers, 210. And maybe I failed to mention that our skipper was Franklin D. Roosevelt Jr.
Really? Yeah.
Did I forget that?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I forget what the highlights are. He was a great skipper.
Wow.
He got us through typhoons and
Yeah, we need to talk about those.
attacks. And well, we only had one typhoon. That was off of Okinawa. And that was another one which took us over 45 or 50 degrees, and I was sure it was never going to level off again. But he did a great job. And let's see, where else was I on this thing? And then, we did for the Philippine liberation, we were also, in addition to screening for the carriers, lobbing shells on shore.
So you were getting that close to shore?
But we never went close. Never went too close. The 5-inch gun will fire 8 or 10 miles.
Oh, right.
So,
Yeah.
And then we went to Okinawa.
Wow.
And we had 78 days of continuous anti-sub duty where we never pulled in anywhere. The boilers never cooled down. And that was our probably biggest confrontation with kamikaze pilots. And then we went back to Guam. And then in June was when our skipper's, President Roosevelt died.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we got a new skipper, and then we joined Halsey's task force for an attack on the island of Honshu, pretty much the same duty, screening, and then into Tokyo Bay for the final grand finale.
Wow. Well, what was it like coming under those kamikaze attacks? All the newsreels and such that I see, it looked terrifying.
Well, you had one, I think, question on that list of yours where it said, did you ever feel stress and pressure? And my answer to that was every time I went to general quarters. I think I had a lot of stress. I wasn't quite out in the open like the guys on the 20 millimeters and the 40 millimeters. I was inside the gun mount, and probably so stupid at that age to think that they can't get me. But one kamikaze pilot slipped through a screen and sunk the carrier. Omni Bay was the carrier. They lost 19 guys on that ship, and we picked up, I think, 4 survivors.
Jeez.
And that was not a good sight.
Yeah. Oh, boy. I've always been amazed too when all those ships out there and the kamikazes and the pilot, all this lead's going up. It's all got to eventually come down. All this lead is heading up.
Yeah.
It's all got to come down somewhere.
Yeah. It was really not exactly a fun time, but it was something that we felt had to be done.
Yeah, yeah. And I've always been amazed too when you guys were off the coast of Okinawa, the sight of all those ships.
Yeah.
That must have been amazing.
Well, the most amazing gathering of ships that I saw was in Tokyo Bay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As far as the eye could see, we had ships. And
So you were in the bay when they signed down in Missouri?
When they signed. And,
really?
MacArthur and all of them on their ship. So I can't remember any other outstanding things. Came back and got discharged.
How was it, in today's world, we've got computers and cell phones and such. Your only alternative as far as communication was mail. And being on the move all the time, was mail, were you able to keep up with?
You probably heard of V-mail, That's what they had then, where the crew would write letters and then they would be microfilmed. They could get, 1,000 letters down to a little package, and then they'd blow them up when they got back, and that was pretty much the way. And if we did come into a port that we were assigned for maintenance, our mail would be there.
Okay.
But a lot of times it had to be transferred from a carrier or cruiser. I don't think we came across any battleships. We might have, but they were able to get mail and move it over to our ship while you're at sea. Same way we get our ice cream.
And being on the move all the time, they were pretty good about keeping up with you?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Wow. They did. Of course, I was never a great letter writer.
No.
So, and I don't think my folks were great responders either. Once in a while, they would write something that they had heard about something they'd heard back in the States where we're getting demolished over there or something. They want to know if that's true. And I said, no, no, we're not.
Well, it was kind of tough for you too, because you really couldn't say a whole lot, right? You couldn't tell where
every letter's censored.
Yeah.
That was our executive officer's job.
Right.
Censoring our mail.
Right.
I tell you one thing about being a radio man, when I think of the executive officer who censored the mail, when I was learning code, the lettering comes around in 5-letter groups. That's the way your code comes across, and you have the earphone, you type. But if you get to copy plain language, it's very difficult. It's letters and numbers and letters. And they let me do that job one time. They said, well, you're ready for plain language. That's difficult to copy. I think you're ready for it now. So I said, oh, great. You put the earphones on. You're not supposed to look at the keyboard or anything. Just listen and type. And you don't look till you pull up the final proof. Well, it was in 1945, my message said that a B-25 flew into the 70th floor of the Empire State Building. and they had, I forget how many fatalities on that. Well, anyway, I took it off, and I think I showed it to Kenny Maxwell, and he started shaking his head, and he said, "You better take that up to the executive officer." And so I did, but he didn't believe it either. He says, "Who took this message? Who did this?" He says, "That was Blackburn. It's his first plain language." So there, they took it to Roosevelt, and he said, "Get another ship on the wire. We want this proofread somewhere. This guy's been smoking something strange." And it turned out it was right. I don't know if you remember that incident, but it was rather unusual. So 9/11 wasn't the first time a plane flew in.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah. So is that how you primarily got your news from the outside world as to what was going on, as far as that and ball scores and
yeah, email or radio.
Did you guys pick up Tokyo Rose?
Ship to ship was usually. It's funny now. Everything is gone that was used then. Ship to ship was semaphore, pretty much. The signalman up there signaling to the other one. Semaphore is done. Next is a Morse code. They'll use a Morse code. Some years ago, I was on vacation and I took a little cruise through Norfolk, and they're telling everybody on the ship what kind of ships are in there. And I said, "Where's all the DEs?" They don't make them anymore. And the Moore was sunk in target practice after the war.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
It served in the Korean War, but so that's my story.
Yeah. So as you're traveling all through the South Pacific, did you get a chance to go into port at any of these places, or were you pretty much on the ship the whole time?
Pretty much. We didn't get a lot of liberty. We did in Ulithi, because that's in the Caroline Islands, where that seemed to be our base of what they called availability or maintenance or whatever. So we got to go ashore, but there was nothing ashore.
Yeah, right.
And I did get to the place that I always wanted to go all my life, which was Waikiki Beach.
Really?
But I had a bad incident there, having been brought up in the Chicago area. I remember going to Lake Michigan all the time, and we had a bunch of guys, and we'd always run right into the water and dive in. Well, I decided to do the same thing at Waikiki Beach, and it's coral.
Oh, no.
And I ran in there, and there's blood all over. And I ran out, and that was my swim at Waikiki Beach. So.
Did you guys ever cross the equator?
Yeah, we did.
Talk about
I forget what the initiation ceremony was.
The shellback ceremony, the lollipog.
Yeah, I really don't remember.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I know they did something.
Yeah.
But they didn't throw me overboard, so I did okay.
Yeah. So they signed the peace treaty in Tokyo Bay, and then you guys headed back to the States, or take your time?
Well, actually, I came back. They offered. See, when they dropped the bomb, which was a great thing for us, because prior to that, every night some DE had to go out on what they called picket duty, which is really looking for subs by yourself, kind of. And they'd lost, I think, 2 of them the weeks before, and the next night it was our assignment, and they dropped the bomb.
Oh, wow.
Cancel it. So if anybody ever asks me how I feel about the A-bomb, I can...
And not to mention, you probably would have been in the thick of the invasion if we had gone ahead with the invasion. Yeah.
So
when you heard about the bomb, could you understand this thing? Did they talk about this huge bomb?
not really. Just when I heard the casualty list, you just went into shock, you know. But what I was going to say is, at the end, they offered us a chance to come back on a transport ship or stay with the DE. And I chose to come back early. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah.
And so believe it or not, they came back on a transport ship at about 5 knots, and the DE went back at about 20 knots. They beat us to the States. And then I came back. And then I had, they had the point system for discharge. So I was to be discharged at Great Lakes, which is where, by then my parents had moved back to the Midwest, and
Okay.
I guess, where do you want to go or something. So they shipped me back to Great Lakes, and then you're supposed to sit there till your points mature. And all of a sudden, I got orders to report to Treasure Island, back on the West Coast. I said, "You've got to be kidding me!" And I said, "What am I supposed to do out there?" And he said, "Well, you're going to be working in something kind of like a." I don't know what you'd call it. It was a place where the sailors could come and have coffee and food and stuff. So, okay, I'll go. And I went back there and sat around there for about 2 months. And they sent me back to Great Lakes. And I told you I'd enlisted in Raleigh, North Carolina, but by then my folks had moved back. They'd moved back where they were within 10 miles of Great Lakes. And at that time, the government gave you a check to go back to where you enlisted, which was Raleigh.
Oh.
So they gave me $200, I think. That's all I had. And I took a cab to my folks' house.
Wow.
That was the end.
Wow.
The end of my illustrious career.
And then from there, did you take some time off and relax, or go back to school, or take your story after once you got home?
I did take some time off, and then with the GI Bill, I went back to, I didn't go to North Carolina, I went to DePaul, P-A-U-W, in Greencastle, Indiana, and I graduated from there. And then became a working slob.
Working slob. And what did you go on to do for a career then?
Well, I worked for 10 years for Johns Manville in their production department, planning and scheduling, industrial engineering and stuff like that. And then I had a chance to start up my own company. Was an absentee ownership fellow wanted to start up a company and wanted me to take it over. I said, "Yeah, I'm ready to get out of here." By then I had 4 kids.
We'll back up and tell that story too. So what industry did you end up going into with your business?
We were in manufacturing, industrial rubber parts, anything from gaskets to bridge bearing pads. Did a lot of work for people like John Deere and International Harvester and people like that. It was mostly a plant that did stamping and molding and extruding, and we were kind of distributors for Uniroyal, which was U.S. It was U.S. rubber then it became Uniroyal. No tires. So.
Yeah. And you went on to do that the rest of your working career then? Right. How long were you in that business?
About 30 years.
Wow. All right, so let's back up now. You talked about 4 children, so you had to woo somebody. Talk about how you met your wife and family and. Well,
I met my wife. She was a nurse, and I met her at the hospital where she worked, and we started dating, and next thing I knew, we were married. Not a long courtship.
no. Wow.
Oh. And I remember the personnel manager at John's Manville selling me on going to work there about it's a wonderful company and there's a lot of room for advancement. And 10 years later, I'm getting my fourth child, and I said, I can't live on what you're... And so I went to the same personnel manager and found out he's leaving the company. I said, I think his name was Fred. I said, Fred, what is this? You told me it was... He said, it's a terrible company, there's no room for advancement. And I said, he said, so if you're looking for more money, I'd suggest you start looking. So I did. That's when I got this opportunity.
Wonderful.
And, off we go.
Through the years, have you ever had have you kept in touch with the guys you served with? Any sort of reunions, anything like that?
No, I really wasn't a big reunion guy, and there was one fella, I remember Art Bailey, he was chief gunner's mate, and we stayed in contact for a while, then he came to visit me in Chicago, and then he disappeared.
Yeah.
And practically all of them have disappeared now.
You just got on with life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Nancy stumbled on a few people Googling on the internet that are still around, but most of them are gone. I've been corresponding with a lady who said her dad was a torpedo man on the ship that I was on.
Wow.
And I can vaguely remember his memory, I can vaguely remember what he looked like, but yeah, I never really kept in touch. So I just recently wrote her a letter. She wanted to know. She said her dad died in, 92 or something from an accident, and she wished that she knew more about what went on, like you're doing here, which is really good. I'm sure there's a lot of people thank you for what you're doing.
Well, Jack, as we start to kind of wind down this interview, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about? Any other stories that have kind of floated to the top as we've been sitting here that you wanted to talk about? And Nancy, jump in if there's anything you'd like to ask or stories that he hadn't told, so that ideally we round out your story as best we can, or do you think we pretty much covered everything that?
I think so. That was pretty much. I went in April of '43, and I think I got out in June of '46, and I had one incident, by the way, which Nancy's now working on. When I was transferring back and forth from Treasure Island to Bainbridge, to Great Lakes, I had to go through Navy Pier, and I had all my uniform, my dress blues, and the ribbons with the stars and everything in a bag, in my sea bag, and I was in a pay line. And when I got to the front of the pay line, and the bag was back there somewhere, and I turned around, pick up my paycheck, and the bag was gone. Nancy has now been contacting the Navy and getting the ribbons and the stars back, because one of my sons said he'd like to have that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So she's working on that now.
Wow.
Can't think of any other stories. I've got some really dumb ones that I couldn't tell you.
Well, it's your tape for you and your family, so it might be dumb to me, but they might be valuable to them.
I think they've heard most of them, but like I say, My favorite time, excuse me, in the Navy was when I was in New York. And we used to go to a USO, and they had a lot of entertainers there and people like that. And I met a young lady there, and they're doing ballroom dancing and stuff, and she asked if I would like to dance. I said, I can't dance for that. And so anyway, as time went on, she agreed. I said, would you like to go out to dinner sometime? She said, sure. So knowing that everything in New York is free, we went to the Cafe Rouge of the Hotel Pennsylvania. These are my only vivid memories. And they had Woody Herman was the band there. And so she said, I said, you want to teach me to dance? She said, yeah, sure. So we danced for a while. Turned out she was with the New York City Ballet. So I tell everybody, I'm a tremendous dancer now, but only music I can dance to is Swan Lake, and I have to have toe shoes. but that was one of my fun times. Oh, what I was going to tell you mostly about it, I didn't pay for anything.
Yeah.
They brought my check.
That's amazing, yeah. I heard
The
that.
people over there, so
Yeah.
wish I could get back in my uniform and get some freebies now. That's about all of the strange things that went on. I can tell you one more about
Please.
Bainbridge. Going through Bainbridge, they had a day of the week which they called air bedding, where all the swabbies supposed to take their mattresses out, hang them on a line. For some reason, I neglected to do it, and the guys said the inspection team is coming up and your mattress is out. So they're not to worry. I said, I'm going to push it out the window. So I pushed it out the window. Unfortunately, the inspection group, the tail end of it coming in the front entrance, I guess he almost got hit with my mattress. And when they came down, of course, the jig's up. And I had to do, I think, 5 or 10 times around the football field with a rifle, carrying the rifle out like this. That's my only, that's my last experience. Anyway.
Well, the last question I always like to ask with this interview is, when you look back on your time in the Navy and everything you experienced over in the South Pacific, did it play a role in your life, change your life, affect your life at all, or do you just look at it as just simply a chapter in your life? How would you answer that?
I think when we picked up the survivors from the Omni Bay, I suddenly realized that, like they say, kids when they're teenagers think they're going to live forever. It's the first time the value of the human life came true to me. I was not a believer in those days and didn't have a great faith. But as I look back now, I think God was watching over me the whole time. I can't answer the question why they didn't watch over those 3 guys we picked up, but anyway, the value of, and the shortness of life. My best friend in high school, one of my best friends, went in the Army, and he played first base on our baseball team. And they shipped him over to Europe. He had a week and he was gone. And, but it was really brought home to me how fragile life, how short it is. And that's a main effect, I think.
Wow. Well, Jack, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your story today, but just as important, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, you're welcome. Like I said to this lady that I wrote the letter to, we had a lot of action over there, but we had some fun times. They were few and far between, but we had them. So.
Well, thank you.